On November 6, 1887, in the parish hall at St Mary's, just a stone's throw from Celtic Park, a group of local businessmen were called together to discuss the possibility of creating a football club with the mission to raise funds to feed the poor. Standing outside Celtic Park, an arena whose size and stature befit the club that call it home, it can be hard to fully appreciate the difficult, desperate and frankly dire circumstances which prompted the foundation of Celtic. That meeting and that mission was the vision of Brother Walfrid, a Marist brother who hailed from County Sligo on the west coast of Ireland. There is arguably nowhere outside the east end of Glasgow with more of a unique connection to Celtic Football Club than Sligo, for it was here that Celtic's founding father, Brother Walfrid, was born and raised. Brother Walfrid's legacy is, of course, enshrined through the existence of Celtic Football Club and the club's many achievements since its formation in 1887. Ballymote's most famous son was immortalised in bronze in 2004 through the unveiling of this wonderful memorial behind me. And we've come here today to his hometown to see where Walfrid's story began. The man who would go on to become Brother Walfrid was born Andrew Kerins on the 18th of May 1840, the youngest son of John and Elizabeth Kerins. Andrew, his older brother Peter, and his mother and father lived in a small cottage in Calton, a rural area just a few miles west of Ballymote. As a Celtic supporter, to be standing here amongst the ruins of the Kerins family home is utterly unique and totally surreal. John, who is the farmer who owns the land upon which the ruins of the home sit, has been kind enough to bring us here today. You can probably tell from the rain that's pounding down about us that the conditions couldn't be worse, and the trek to get up here was a little bit treacherous, but it was so worth it. It's absolutely extraordinary that these buildings still exist to this day. Just to my right hand side here, this is the gable wall of what would have been the Kerins family home, and you can actually have a little look in here through what would have been the window. You can see the sort of size of the building itself. To my left hand side, incredibly, this is the barn where the family may have stored, grain. They may have housed animals here as well. We can actually head inside and you can see the quite impressive condition that the building is still in to this day. Like I say, it's totally surreal as a Celtic supporter to be standing here. So this is it. This is where Brother Walfrid, Celtic's founding father, grew up, was born and raised. And I don't think it's too much of a stretch to say that, of course, this is the ancestral home of the Kerins family, but in many ways, this is the ancestral home of Celtic Football Club as well. To think that our football club, worldwide, supporters in every corner of the globe, has its roots right here in rural Sligo and Ballymote. It's just something incredibly special. Andrew Kerins' childhood was backdropped by Angorta Mór, the Great Hunger, which saw an estimated 1 million Irish people perish in the most diabolical conditions. The potato blight, which struck in late 1845, brought around the decimation of the potato crop, and the actions of the landed gentry and ruling elite in Ireland brought about the famine. Between the first month of Angorta Mór, September 1845, and New Year's Day 1846, enough food was exported from Irish shores to feed the population of Ireland twice. The Irish people suffered and starved in the midst of plenty. We've travelled up from Ballymote to St John's Hospital in Sligo, where the Sligo workhouse once stood. Behind me is a famine graveyard where countless numbers of people are buried. To my left, there's a signpost which leads to the children's graveyard, which, as the name suggests, are where the youngest victims of the famine were laid to rest. Sligo is one of the 5 counties which make up the province of Connacht, which was the worst affected in terms of loss during the years of An Gorta Mór. And being here in this graveyard, there is a real palpable feeling of grief and loss which is hard to define. On the gates which lead in to the graveyard, there's a plaque which defines the horrors which the people would have gone through in those years. It reads, "You are entering a long abandoned famine graveyard. Here, on the grounds of County Sligo's 1841 workhouse, lie buried the ravaged bones of unnumbered thousand nameless souls." There's then a quote which reads, "I witnessed the women and little children, crowds of whom were to be seen scattered over the turnip fields like a flock of famished crows, devouring the raw turnips. Mothers, half naked, shivering in the snow and sleet, uttering exclamations of despair, whilst their children were screaming with hunger. The workhouse is full, and police are stationed at the doors to keep the numerous applicants out. Captain Wynne, District Inspector, Christmas Eve, 1846. It's hard to comprehend the conditions in which the people who are buried behind me perished, but this memorial behind me is a lasting tribute to their memory. Facing diminished employment prospects in the aftermath of the destruction of An Gorta Mór, and with his older brother Peter due to inherit his parents' landholding, Andrew Kerins decided to leave Ireland and head to Glasgow with his friend Bart McGettrick in 1855. The boys sold a calf at the Ballymote fair to pay for their voyage to Glasgow, and they departed from here at the port of Sligo, where countless numbers of Sligo natives had embarked on voyages to England or America. For young Andrew, though, he was destined for the Brumelaw in Glasgow, and one wonders whether the young man was aware of the challenges that lay ahead. For the vast majority of the suffering people who had been left with no choice but to flee their homeland, Scotland, and Glasgow specifically, represented an opportunity to build a new life, to survive and to live without the fear of starvation. The reality, though, proved to be entirely different. Arriving here on the Clydeside, the impoverished people were often met with derision and hatred, with vicious anti-Catholic and anti-Irish sentiment rampant throughout the natives. The migrant population, after fleeing the most horrendous conditions imaginable, arrived here in Glasgow and were dragooned into slum conditions in the east end of the city. Damp, overcrowded, unsanitary, just a few words that can be used to describe the living conditions of the Irish in Glasgow throughout the late 1800s. In this environment, community was key to survival, and the provision of charity from the Catholic Church was a vital lifeline for so many people. By the 1870s, Andrew Kerins had become Brother Walfrid after completing his training in France. And after returning to the east end of Glasgow, Brother Walfrid's life was committed to his faith and to improving the lives of the people in the communities here.
Immediately, the first thing that I imagine would have struck him would have been the difference between, number one, the switch from a kind of rural surrounding to a heavily populated urban environment, and of course, like at this point in history in the mid-19th century, Glasgow had begun to become heavily industrialised. So the vast majority of the Irish immigrants congregated here in the East End of Glasgow. And there was, of course, associated problems with that, overpopulation, spread of kind of public health issues as well, related to poverty more widely as well here in Glasgow. So there would have been a huge kind of sea change in his outlook, his experience of life. And within that, we need to remember that he was only 15 years old as well. So a huge kind of shock to the system, as you can imagine, for a young boy.
When Brother Walfrid has then completed his training and he arrives in Glasgow, then again, am I right in saying he becomes a teacher at Sacred Heart in Bridgeton, is that correct?
So he spends a majority of his teaching career as the headmaster, the head teacher of Sacred Heart, beginning in 1874 right through to his departure to London in 1892. So it's there at that time that he's effectively the most senior Marist brother in this part of the city. As a head teacher, had a respectable role and an influential role in the immediate kind of Irish Catholic community, and it's there that you see him kind of willing and able to involve other influential people in the foundation of the football club especially, and that's something that I think is one kind of personal quality of Walfrid's that stands out above possibly all others, is his ability to bring together different kinds of people under a united kind of cause, and that kind of resulted in the Foundation of Celtic in 1887.
What precisely, to your understanding, prompts this Marist brother, whose life is dedicated to education and to serving the people, what prompts him to think, I'm going to start a football team?
It's interesting. When I was researching the origins of Celtic, I was looking for evidence of Marist connections with football in the East End, and it was really interesting to find in one of the school registers that the Marist brothers were to the forefront of introducing sport, and specifically the football to the schools that they were tasked with running in the East End. So they, again, were quite visionary in terms of noticing, first and foremost, the interest amongst especially young boys in Glasgow at that time, as football was beginning to really take off, and of course the success of Hibs in Edinburgh as well. Hibs won the Scottish Cup of 1887. They're invited here to St Mary's to celebrate their success, and it's no accident that 6 months later, having been challenged by their counterparts in Edinburgh to go and do likewise, that Walfrid accepts that gauntlet that's thrown down, and again we see him being able to influence and involve other members of the community to lead this drive to create a football club. I think that's a key thing to bear in mind with Walfrid. He's celebrated as the founder of the club, but he didn't work alone. His main strength was in terms of bringing people on side and working together to provide kind of charitable funds that would in turn help the poor children of the East End.
Part of the wonderful thing about St Mary's is, like we say, it's so linked to the club. You see the mosaic on the way in to the church, which obviously outlines, the foundation of the club took place here at St Mary's, but also just outside there's the monument to Gortamore and the victims who perished across an island or right here in the east end of Glasgow. There's no real denying the fact that this is, for as much as Ballymote might be our ancestral home in terms of the building that Brother Walfrid was raised in, this is our spiritual home right here in the Calton.
I think that's the perfect way of describing it. And I think, Celtic's quite an organic, authentic expression of what came out of such a dark period in the history of Ireland. But also it's testament to the strength of the community that grew here in the east end of Glasgow. It's kind of personified in the life of Walfrid in terms of the attitude of self-help, taking action on behalf of others, taking responsibility for improving conditions, not only for yourself as an individual, but on a community kind of basis. And I think that's something that's rightly remains at the centre of what the club continues to do in its modern role through the foundation. I think that's something that Walfrid would look back on with pride.
When he was the head teacher, obviously Brother Walfrid, the head teacher at Sacred Heart School in Bridgeton, just along the road, he was obviously pivotal in setting up the Poor Children's Dinner Table, a charitable initiative, and the penny dinners as well. Just wondering if you could give us a little outline of what that was, who it was for, and how it operated.
Yeah, so this began in 1884. Walfrid, along with a fellow Marist brother, Brother Dorotheus, who again was Irish born as well. The two of them together instituted a daily school feeding programme. So it can be understood as a kind of precursor to free school meals. So this is obviously in the days before state support for children through the education system. And Walfrid was able to organise a daily feeding programme whereby for the symbolic sum of a penny, and this is recorded in Walfrid's own writings, if the child's family could afford the penny, that would be gratefully received, and in return they would be provided with a warm meal before their day's education. If the child could not afford the penny, in terms of protecting the child's dignity, there was no pressure to provide the funds. The funds were then provided externally from the St Vincent de Paul Society that Walfrid was a member of for life. But the concept behind the Poor Children's Dinner Tables was number one, to provide each child with a nourishing warm meal, but secondly to encourage the children to attend school, because in this time in the late 19th century there was no legal requirement for families to send their children to school. So I mentioned like the introduction of the football, the Poor Children's Dinner Tables would have been another concept where the Marist brothers could encourage children to attend school, but also I think it speaks to the levels of poverty and the difficulties that we're facing families in the East End, and sadly that's something that continues in a different form today. But what Walfrid was able to achieve was a daily kind of feeding programme that could help alleviate the situation for some individuals.
If the foundation of Celtic was the dream of Brother Walfrid, then the man who made that dream a reality was John Glass, a local businessman of Donegal heritage. Glass's involvement in the early days of Celtic was vital, and prompted Willie Maley to remark that he was the man to whom Celtic owed their existence.
Glass organised a group of volunteers to help build the original Celtic Park. Now, the site of the original stadium is marked by this wonderful plaque which was put here by the Celtic Graves Society. Celtic used this patch of land as their home stadium for the first 4 years of the club's story before moving to the site of the current stadium in 1892. Our first match was played on the 28th of May 1888, the day that we beat Rangers 5-2. And in a footballing sense, for Celtic, the rest, as they say, is history. But one constant throughout the club's story has been the charitable work that Celtic have undertaken.
One example of that charitable work and the continuation of Walfrid's mission is Celtic FC Foundation's Paradise Pit Stop initiative.
Paradise Pit Stop is a feeding initiative that we deliver here at Celtic Park 4 days a week, 2 afternoons and 2 evenings. Over the course of a year, over 23,000 hot meals provided for some of the most vulnerable people in our communities. This project resonates with our supporters because it is at the very heart of why the football club was formed. Here we are, we're 138 years down the line, and unfortunately there is still needs in our communities. There's a cost of living crisis. People are living in, food poverty and fuel poverty. So I think that this is very much a crisis intervention. It's not sustainable, but it's a first foot through the door here to see what other support is on offer.
Just behind us we can hear, the plates and all the serving area being set up for the food. But what always strikes me whenever I hear about the Paradise Pit Stop or come along here is that it's a bit more than just the food that's provided, because some of the staff were even saying earlier, a lot of people just come for the conversations that they're having with some of their friends who they know through the Paradise Pit Stop. Isolation
and loneliness is such a big issue for so many people in our communities. So there's a lot of people that come along not just for the nice hot meal, but more importantly so that they've got somebody to talk to, somebody to have a conversation with. For many people it's maybe the only conversation they've had that day, so it really can't be underestimated just how important that is for the project also.
The origin story of Celtic is quite unique in world sport in terms of the circumstances around the need for a football club to raise these charitable funds that could then be redirected to charitable initiatives like the school dinners or school feeding programme, but also Celtic was such a kind of quick success that the charity then extended to other kind of worthy causes at the time as well. I was quite lucky as a researcher that the football club has what can be understood as a written constitution in terms of the newsletter that was circulated to announce the formation of the football club. So it reads, a football club will be formed for the maintenance of the poor children's dinner tables attached to the parishes of St Mary's, Sacred Heart, St Michael's and the East End of Glasgow. So that was the initial kind of focus, the initial impetus. Of course it expanded quite quickly, but in that case the story of Celtic is quite unique in terms of its origins.
They kind of remember all the weeks, the cups, even the victory. All those cups and victories that are Celtic have had. The history of Celtic goes a lot further and a lot deeper than what happens when we pick it up. A very simple sentence uttered by Brother Walfrid himself on the 6th of November 1887. A football club will be formed for the maintenance of their tools, for the children and young people.
Nearly 140 years on from the foundation of Celtic, the club still represents Brother Walfrid's vision through the many charitable endeavours that it undertakes. From humble origins in rural Ballymote and against famine and oppression, Celtic Football Club has risen to become a global institution. But at the core of who we are, and guided by Walfrid's dream, the club's original mission continues.